For example, the final rule specifies that the DOJ does not agree with the assertions made by testing and educational entities that evidence of testing and grades is objective and therefore should be weighed more heavily, while evidence of self-mitigating measures, informal accommodations, or recently provided accommodations or modifications is inherently subjective and should be afforded less consideration. Congress's discussion of the relevance of testing outcomes and grades clearly indicates that it did not consider them definitive evidence of the existence or non-existence of a disability, while tests and grades typically are numerical measures of performance. The capacity to quantify them does not make them inherently more valuable with respect to proving or disproving disability. To the contrary, Congress's incorporation of rules of construction emphasizing broad coverage of disabilities to the maximum extent permitted, its direction that such determinations should neither contemplate ameliorative, mitigating measures, nor demand extensive analysis, and its recognition of learned and adaptive modifications all support its openness for individuals with impairments to put forward a wide range of evidence to demonstrate their disabilities. The final rule emphasizes that Congress made clear its intention that the ADA's protections should encompass people whose impairment requires an assessment that focuses on how they engage in major life activities rather than the ultimate outcome of those activities. In addition, the final rule clarifies that mitigating measures can include, quote, learned behavioral or adaptive neurological modifications, end quote, psychotherapy, behavioral therapy, or physical therapy, and reasonable modifications or auxiliary aids and services. The phrase learned behavioral or adaptive neurological modifications is intended to include strategies developed by an individual to lessen the impact of an impairment. The phrase reasonable modifications is intended to include informal or undocumented accommodations and modifications, as well as those provided through a formal process. The final rule recognizes that students may have developed their own ways to support their disability in order to perform major life activities required during daily life, and that such measures cannot be used to find that the person is not substantially limited. Furthermore, the final rule notes that self-mitigating measures or undocumented modifications or accommodations for students who have impairments that substantially limit learning, reading, writing, speaking, or concentrating may include such measures as arranging to have multiple reminders for task completion, seeking help from others to provide reminders, or to assist with the organization of tasks, selecting courses strategically, such as selecting courses that require papers instead of exams, devoting a far larger portion of the day, weekends, and holidays to study than students without disabilities, teaching oneself strategies to facilitate reading connected text or mnemonics to remember facts, including strategies such as highlighting and margin noting, being given extra time to complete tests, receiving modified homework assignments, or taking exams in a different format or in a less stressful or anxiety-provoking setting. Each of these mitigating measures, whether formal or informal, documented or undocumented, can improve the academic function of a student having to deal with a substantial limitation in a major life activity such as concentrating, reading, speaking, learning, or writing. The final rule also discusses the effects of the ADA Amendments Act on academic requirements in post-secondary education. Specifically, it notes that nothing in the Act changed the existing ADA requirement that covered entities provide reasonable modifications in policies, practices, and procedures unless the entity can demonstrate that making such modifications, including academic requirements in post-secondary education, would fundamentally alter the nature of goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, or accommodations involved. The final rule emphasizes that Congress noted that the reference to academic requirements in post-secondary education was included, quote, solely to provide assurances that the bill does not alter current law with regard to the obligations of academic institutions under the ADA, end quote.